I will tell you when you need to start writing stuff down and analyzing things. But first, we're just going to talk briefly about the poem, just some facts about it, and a brief little introduction to who the author is. So this poem is called Avarice by Yusuf Komunyakaa. You're not really going to have to say his name very much, especially over Zoom, or say the name of the title of the poem over Zoom, but you are expected to spell his name correctly. You are expected to type out the title of this poem correctly as well. So familiarize yourself with the spelling, or make sure you have it. So if you are asked to write some sort of paragraph or analysis on this, and you have to utilize his name and the title, make sure you're doing it correctly. Also notice poems, because they are considered short works, they are always written with quotation marks around the title. That is proper MLA formatting of titles of poems, okay? You are expected to know that. It is not underlined. It is not written in italics. It is not bolded. It is within quotation marks only, okay? So be aware of that. All right, so this is a picture of him. You can see that on the screen. Some information about him. He was born in 1947 and he grew up in New Orleans. And he is a very famous writer. He talks about the topics of greed and living in luxury and excess a lot. Specifically in a work that has lots of poems, lots of little short writings. This piece is part of a larger whole in which he wrote 7 poems. Each are dealing with one of the 7 deadly sins. So avarice is one of the 7 deadly sins. So what I want you guys to do right now, you guys have your PDF version of the poem, and I'm going to pull mine up as well and share it with you guys. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is I want you to Google the word avarice. You need to understand what that word means if you want to understand what the poem's about to be about. So we're going to Google that word. You're going to do that right now, and then you're going to add the definition next to the title, or above the title, or right below it, or whichever, okay? So I'm going to give you like 40 seconds to Google the word avarice. What does that word mean? And then you're going to write it at the top of your poem. And I'll call in someone. Okay. All right, let's hear from Brianna. Brianna, what does avarice mean?
In which part? I was confused on what to read.
You're just looking up the word avarice in Google.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, I'll call in someone else. Okay, Isaiah, what is the definition of avarice? What does it mean?
The definition of avarice is extreme greed for wealth or material gain.
Very good. Extreme greed for wealth or material gain. Okay, so that is what he titled this poem. This is considered one of the 7 deadly sins, meaning it will only cause problems, okay? If something is a deadly sin, it's only going to cause problems for people. So the fact that he already titled his poem avarice, we can assume that his opinion of avarice is not going to be a positive thing, okay? Or his opinion of greed is not going to be positive. So he kind of already gave us a hint with his title what this is going to be about, okay? And I'll even type that in here. This title is a hint toward what this poem is about, okay? Now, we are eventually going to get to what is the theme of this poem, or what are we learning? What is the message that Yusuf Komunyakaa is trying to convey to us? So a question that I want you guys to keep in mind, and I'm going to just add this to the top of my document. If you would like to add it for yourself as well, you can do that. I want you to be thinking of what is Komunyakaa trying to convey about greed. Okay, what is he trying to get us to understand about greed? What is his opinion on that? So we are going to be reading this poem and keeping this question in mind. But before doing that, I do want to tell you how you're going to reference these chunks of writing, okay? Because you might be asked to write something about this and you do need to understand how to do that. Or you might be asked to even talk about this. So chunks of writing in poetry is very different than chunks of writing in an essay or article or book or whatever. These are not called paragraphs. Do not reference them as paragraphs, okay? These are called stanzas. So each chunk of writing that is separated by a big space or even just one space is called a stanza. So go ahead and label each one and number them. Stanza number 1. This is stanza 2. This is stanza 3. We'll be summarizing each stanza underneath these labels. So that's why I'm having you label them as well. And this is stanza 4. Okay, so when you're actually referencing this, you're not going to have the author's last name in parentheses. You're actually just going to write parentheses stanza 1, or you'll have like line blank, okay? Each of these are considered one line. Just because the period comes like 5 lines later does not mean that is all one line. So it'd be line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth, okay? You are expected to count lines, okay? You should know how many lines are in the poem because you need to know how to reference them when actually writing about it. So be aware, you are expected to count the lines if you ever have to write about this. So that being said, we are going to start by actually reading this poem. We will be reading it quite a few times because we're going to have to read it for understanding. We're going to have to read it for analysis. I'm going to read it once to you, okay? And then I'm going to have you read it on your own. And then we're going to go back in and read it stanza by stanza to summarize them, okay? While I'm reading, if you don't know what something is, I would underline it or start looking it up because you will get to read it again on your own. So please make sure if you're not getting something that you're looking it up. All right, I'm going to start reading. So let's get into this. At 6, she chewed off the 7 porcelain buttons from her sister's christening gown and hid them in a Prince Albert can on a sill crisscrossing the house in the spidery crawl space. She'd weigh a peach in her hands till it rotted. At 16, she gazed at her little brother's June bugs pinned to a sheet of cork, assaying their glimmer till she buried them beneath a fig tree's wide green skirt. Now, 26, locked in the beauty of her bones, she counts 8 engagement rings at least 12 times each day. All right, so that is the poem Avarice. Now I want you to take 2 minutes to read it yourself while possibly looking up certain words if you're like, I don't even know what that word means, okay? So take the next 2 minutes to do that, to just simply read the poem on your own. All right, guys, so let's break this down. We're going to read each stanza on its own and think about what exactly is going on here. It is not going to be complicated, okay? So if you're like, it seems pretty straightforward, what's happening? That's totally fine. I hope it seems straightforward to you. That means you're understanding it. Okay, so stanza 1, I'm going to call on somebody to read it, and then I'll just ask if anyone thinks they understand what's going on here, okay? So let's have Brianna. Brianna, go ahead and read stanza 1 for us.
At 6, she chewed off the 7 porcelain buttons from her sister's christening gown and hid them in a Prince Albert can.
Very good. Okay, so what is happening here? What is this girl doing? Can anyone tell me? You can just unmute yourself.
Stealing.
Okay, what is she stealing?
She's stealing the buttons off of her sister's christening gown.
Very good. Okay, so the girl is stealing buttons off her sister's gown. Very good. Okay, and she's hiding them because it does say, and then she hid them in a Prince Albert can. Okay, gown, and then hides them. Okay, very good. All right, let's move on to stanza 2. Very simple, guys. Good job. Oh, also let's get down her age here because they do mention age a few times. So I'm just going to add it to the end. She is 6 years old. Wonderful. Okay, stanza number 2. Let's have Andy. Andy, go ahead and read stanza 2 for us.
On a sill crisscrossing the house in a spidery crawl space, she weighed a peach in her hands till it rotted at 16.
Very good. Okay, so this stanza really isn't saying too much. It's actually building on the previous stanza and then kind of going into the following stanza. So I'll kind of summarize this one for us, just so that way it's easier. So as it says in stanza 1, it says, and hid them in a Prince Albert can on a sill crisscrossing the house in the spidery crawl space. So it basically just tells us where she hid the buttons. So I'm just gonna write this stanza tells us where she hid the buttons. And then, let's see, let's change the font size here. It does say this idea of she'd weigh a peach in her hands till it rotted. This is just intended to comment on the fact that she keeps things until they're no longer useful or good to her, okay? So she keeps things until they are bad or useless. And then it comments on her age, okay? So she's 16. We know she begins, or she is now 16. Okay. Give you guys a moment to write that out on your own paper before we go on to stanza 3. If you already have it written out and you'd like to summarize stanza 3 on your own, you can do that right now. That way you're still working. All right, Philip, can you read stanza 3 for us?
She gazed at her little brother's June bugs pinned to a sheet of cork, azing their glimmer till she buried them beneath a fig tree's wide.
Very good. Okay, so what is she doing in this stanza? So she is what? Okay, let's start off here. What does it mean if you're gazing at something? What is that a synonym for?
You're looking.
Looking, very good. Okay, so she's looking at her little brother's June bugs that are pinned to a sheet of cork. So what does it mean if they're pinned to a sheet of cork? What does that sound like he's doing with the June bugs?
He's collecting them.
He's collecting them. Perfect. Okay, so if you guys know anything about bug collections, that's usually how they do it. They collect them like on a board, or they have them in some sort of like protective sealant thing. So because this June bug is like a beetle, he kind of just like pinned it to a board for himself, but it is a collection, okay? So it says she's looking at her little brother's June bug collection, basically. A saying, does anybody know what a saying is, or did anyone look that word up? All right, why doesn't everybody go ahead and look up the word a saying? What does that mean? What does the word a saying mean?
Testing quality.
Okay, very good. So it's appraising the quality of something. So now she's looking at the June bug collection, deciding how good it is based off of how it shines, and then she buries them beneath a fig tree in the yard, okay? So she takes them from her brother. She takes his collection because she wants them. Okay, so she is looking at her brother's June bug collection, deciding if she wants them, and then takes them from him. Okay, wonderful. Move this one down. I'll give you guys a moment to add that to yours. And then we'll move on to stanza 4. All right, let's have Priya. Priya, can you go ahead and read stanza 4 for us?
green skirt. Now 26, locked in the beauty of her bones, she counts 8 engagement rings at least 12 times a day.
All right, very good. So this green skirt portion is just adding to where she buried the June bugs. Okay, so this one is starting off by telling us what? What does it start off by telling us now? She is what?
She's 26.
Okay, she is now 26. Okay, and what is she doing in this stanza?
Like counting her engagement rings, and like she's not doing this, but it's saying how like she thinks she's like really pretty, or it seems like she thinks.
Yeah, so we would say she is, I would probably just comment on the fact that she is counting all of her engagement rings, which in order to get an engagement ring, right, somebody has to fall in love with you. I'm assuming that person would also find you attractive in one way or another. So yeah, you could add in like that also means that she was attractive to 8 people, okay? And then how many times a day does she count these engagement rings or stare at these engagement rings?
12.
Oh, 12 minimum, okay. She's counting all of her engagement rings at least 12 times every day. If you're counting something that much, how do you feel about it? Like if you're constantly looking at something, what are you doing with that? Like, how do you feel?
You like it a lot?
You like it a lot, or you're obsessed with it, right? It's something that means a lot to you. So we can assume that she's probably obsessed over these rings. All right. So if we're looking at all these summaries, we can kind of come to the conclusion for an overall summary. So I want you to take your own ideas, whatever you wrote in these different stanza summaries, and I want you to compile just a simple 1-sentence summary at the bottom. So this poem is about what? Keep in mind the topic or the title of this poem. What is this poem about? If you had to summarize it in 1 sentence, go ahead and take 2 minutes to write your own. Again, just the stanzas 1, 3, and 4. What is the significance of the object to the person she is taking it from? All right, let's go back into the poem together and talk about the significance of these objects to these people who she's taking them from. All right, so for the porcelain buttons, what might be the significance of that dress or of the buttons for the person she's taking it from? What notes did you make next to that? Change the color for this. All right, so let's hear from, let's see, Amelia. Amelia, what did you write for the possible significance of these buttons or the gown?
I said since they're like porcelain, they're probably fragile, and I don't know if porcelain's expensive, but I said maybe it's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. And I said it could be valuable to her sister, and it's something that her sister probably doesn't want taken from her.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know what a christening gown is, if you know what a baptism is, it's basically what a girl would wear to her baptism. Okay. So that is a very spiritual experience, depending on how old the girl was at that time. We don't know how old her sister was, or how old the dress is, but we can assume that that has an emotional connection to it, right? So she probably values that dress, not only because of it, the buttons being expensive and fragile, but also for the event in which the dress was worn, okay? If the girl was younger, maybe didn't understand the significance of the dress, her family probably did. So like her parents understood the significance of the dress. So we know that it's not only fragile, but also valuable to the sister and family for its emotional, we'll say for emotional reasons. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Amelia. All right, so we're skipping the peach. We are going to stanza 3. So what is the significance of this collection to her brother? Let's hear from Cyrus. Cyrus, what did you say for the significance of the June bugs collection?
I said it's his brothers that he worked to like collect the June bugs, so he wouldn't want people just taking it.
Good. He worked hard to collect the bugs. It does take a lot of time, takes time and patience to put together a collection. And he probably finds that to be very valuable. He likes the bugs, so he wants to collect them. So we know that this collection is valuable to him. Patience, very valuable to the brother. All right, good. And now let's finish off with stanza 4 of the engagement rings. So what is the significance of the engagement rings to the people that gave them to her? Let's hear from Varnica. Varnica, what did you write for the significance here?
For the significance of stanza 4, I wrote that like the engagement rings, that's probably really like valuable to someone, obviously, because it's rings.
Right. And do you mean valuable like expensive or emotionally valuable?
It's both, actually, because it's like first engagement rings are really expensive, and then on top of that, it's like it holds a connection between two people.
Yes, good. So it's intended to represent a connection between people, between two people, unity, love, happiness are things that it actually represents and are a symbol for. So we're going to get into next class because we don't really have time. We only have a couple minutes left. So this is where we're going to leave off, but we're going to get into from looking at this and how these items are connected to their original owners. What does it show us she's valuing when we're looking at this? Like, is she valuing the item over these people's emotions and what they care about? So we'll get into that next class. I'll pull up this document next class as well. So if you did miss something, I can always go back to it for you. But if you have all of this stuff on here and you are good to go, your notes are done for the day, then you are free to leave, okay? Have a great day, guys. I will see you next time.
Bye, Miss Condos.
Thank you. Bye.